look at the core of the Prism Analytics, right? Now, as I
Okay.
have been mentioning till now, uh, earlier Discovery Board used to be a part of Prism Analytics. Now they are uh, Discovery Board can be built based on Workday data sources as well as Prism data sources. So Prism is just a source of data for a Discovery Board, just like Prism can be
Mm-hmm.
used as a source of data for any normal report in Workday, right? So we can build our
Okay.
reports on the Prism Analytics. So what exactly is Prism Analytics? I think we spoke about this in brief, but
Right.
so the whole idea behind Prism Analytics is that so basically with Workday Prism Analytics, uh, both data admins and analysts can analyze Workday and non-Workday data together. So the whole idea or the crux of Prism Analytics is that it allows me to visualize, analyze, transform, and deal with both Workday and non-Workday data. All right. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So Prism Analytics, it basically consists of three major phases, and I think we spoke about this earlier. So what are the three phases or uh, three parts of a Prism workflow?
Uh,
So, okay, no problem. So, the first one is to get data.
yeah.
So, if you see, this is exactly similar to an EIB. If you look at an EIB workflow, it talks about get data, transform data, deliver data. This is very similar to that. The first aspect is to obviously get data, right? And you do that from both Workday sources and or non-Workday sources. All right. The second one is to transform data or prepare data, right? Now, there are different aspects of this transforming data, and we'll talk about these aspects, right? So there are different
Mm-hmm.
phases. We'll talk about pipelines, we'll talk about stages, we'll talk about blends, uh, joining data, merging data. We'll talk about delivery. We'll talk about prism calculations. So there are quite a few aspects of preparing data. Okay. But then
Yeah.
the three major aspects is transform, apply security, and publish. And finally, so the whole purpose of this exercise is that we can analyze data. And this is what I've been telling. So discovery board is just one of those options to analyze data, right?
Right.
And you do that using discovery boards or and reports, dashboards. All right. So this is in general a Prism workflow. Okay. We'll talk about and within this three steps, I think we have also spoken about the details, the five-phase process. I'll any which ways list that down. Okay. So what are the steps for Prism setup? So obviously Prism is not part of your standard subscription. You'll have to
Yeah.
again a separate subscription, but then in the sense that Prism can be enabled on the same tenant. You don't need a separate tenant for Prism as such, right? So if you want, you can enable Prism as the same on same tenant as your production, your sandbox. You don't need a separate setup for Prism. All right. Okay. The second
Okay.
aspect is obviously the first aspect is your subscription and stuff. The second aspect is your enable Prism analytics functional area, and you do that using task maintain functional area. So the first thing, in fact, for any functionality in Workday is to enable those respective functional areas. So if I go back and show this in the tenant, okay. So functional areas is my report. The first thing that I would do is enable the Prism Analytics functional area. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. The second thing is obviously once my functional areas are enabled, I would have to enable the domain security policies for Prism. Now, if I go into the system, these are all my Prism related domains.
Okay.
Okay, so in Prism, there are two aspects. One is a data set, and now recently Workday has introduced something called a table, which just came in this release, or I think last release, 2020 R1. But any which ways we'll talk. It's a very simple similar concept as a data source, as a data set, and we'll talk about this. But as such, these are the domains that you'll have to enable. So the domains are Prism datasets create, Prism datasets manage, Prism datasets publish, Prism datasets owner manage. Similarly, we have Prism data tables create, Prism tables manage, Prism tables owner manage, Prism tables truncate, update, and so on and so forth.
Okay. So
We'll
one
talk.
question. So
Mhm,
when
mhm.
we enable the functional area,
Mhm.
automatically these domains will get enabled?
No,
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 right?
you'll have
Not
to
necessarily.
enable them. So if you remember
Okay.
the way I enabled the discovery
Right.
board, right?
Correct.
So
Correct. Yeah.
discovery board is part of, let me show you. I think
Mm-hmm.
it's part of the system functional area. System. Let's look at ABC. Yeah, if you see discovery boards, right? So even though discovery boards
Yeah.
create and discover, so even though the system functional area itself was active or enabled,
Mm-hmm.
but our discovery boards domains were not enabled, right? And we had to enable them, and then you were able to access discovery boards,
Right. Right.
right?
Yeah.
So a functional area can have many functionalities, right? So for example, if I talk about talent and performance itself may have many functionalities. For example, succession planning, goal setting, mentorship, feedback, and so on and so forth. But probably I'm not using feedback, so I would not enable those specific domains within talent and performance.
Okay.
Okay. So the second step is to basically enable the Prism functional areas, Prism domains, and obviously as part of enabling those domains, I'll also create the respective security group, right? Now, one thing about security
Mm-hmm.
groups is once you have enabled with respect to security groups, so the third task is
Oh,
once
we
you have
need to
enabled,
clean
sorry,
it. No, 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 no. Nothing. Sorry.
okay. So enabling a domain is different, but then once a domain is enabled, you also have to give uh, different security groups access to that domain, right? Now, this is a question: do you want, for example, a separate role, a separate security group who is managing your Prism, and or you want your own data administrators or data analysts or report writers? They have access, or those security groups should have access to Prism. So obviously the next thing is you either create existing security groups, or you use create new security groups, or use existing security groups for for
Mm.
enabling the Prism access. But then one thing to note is, uh, as per Workday recommendation or the standard, we only use either unconstrained, or if we are using constrained, then only role based constrained security groups.
Okay. But these are not the user-based groups. These are not, these cannot be user-based groups, right?
So
What will
unconstrained
be the
can be a
type
user.
then?
These are the types, right? So unconstrained can be a user based group as well, or in fact unconstrained is a user based group, isn't it?
Yeah, unconstrained is a user-based, but we also have different types, right? So are we saying the unconstrained is equivalent to user-based security group,
Yes. So
and we
see,
will be using only these two, is it?
so if you are talking about constrained, we only create role based constraint,
Okay. Okay.
right?
Okay.
And see, if we are talking about unconstrained, then the general practice is usually we create user based. So for example, data administrator, right? Now, why would you
Right.
create, for example, a job based unconstrained security group, right? So usually the idea
But
is
we
all these.
also have.
We have others as well. Yes. So most of the
Mm,
security groups are of type constrained and unconstrained. For example, as you mentioned, we have role based unconstrained. Unconstrained, we have role
right.
based constrained, right? But the
Right.
way I have seen is, when we talk about, at least in the projects that I have worked with, uh, when when we talk about an unconstrained security group in the context of Prism, unless there is, we have only, or at least I have only created the uh, user based ones,
Okay.
right? Workday as
Okay.
such, the only, if you look at the Workday description and the community, it only talks about unconstrained security groups or role based constrained security groups. So probably we
Correct.
can create other unconstrained, because it just says unconstrained, but I have at least not created any.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Okay, one thing, another thing to note, and this is important. So when we create a role based constraint, so when role based constraint, so if you remember, when we define any role based security group which is of type constraint, we have two different configurations that we do. One is access
Yes.
rights to multiple job workers, and then this another
Correct.
option. So when a
Um,
role based, let's, for example, if I open,
HR partner.
so let's open manager. Okay, so this is the part I'm talking about. So whenever we create a role-based constraint security group, right, with respect to this option, access rights to multiple job workers, we only select role has access to the positions they support. If we select any other
Mm,
option, the security authorizations or the security group doesn't work as expected. And however, this is only for employees who are doing multiple jobs. Okay, here we can have any option
Mhm.
with respect to access rights, but with respect to this, which is basically employees working on multiple jobs, we only select this option. You are you aware why we configure these options? What is the purpose?
Yeah, I think see, there's Workday do allow you to select multiple jobs. I mean, a worker can have multiple jobs, primary and secondary job. So
Right.
probably if he's a manager, I think from I have never used that configuration though, but what I feel is if it has to give an access to all the positions where he is a manager,
Mm-hmm.
or whatever the role for that matter. So whether it has to provide access to primary position only or all the positions where he was a manager,
Okay.
or
So
you know
fairly, yeah,
maybe.
I think, yeah, you have, so that's correct, but let me
Not
still clarify it.
exactly.
Okay. So,
Not
okay. So the first
exactly.
thing, when role-based constrained security group is created, uh, select role has access to the positions they support for the access rights to multiple job workers option. So for this option, which is access right to multiple job workers, we select the option role has access to the positions they support. Okay, so what are these three options, right? So the first option is role has access to the positions they support. In terms of options, we have three options here. The first one is this, and then we have another option, and then we have a third option. Yeah, Sai, are you there?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay, sorry. Okay, so let's say I have an employee who has multiple positions. Now you already know whenever an employee has additional jobs, his primary position is the position on which he is originally hired or staffed. Right? So every employee
yeah.
would have at least one primary position. Not at least, he would have one primary position, and then in addition to that, he may have one or multiple additional positions or additional jobs. Okay, so let's say I have an employee and the employee is EMP1, right? Now he is
Yeah.
occupying, okay, so let's say I have an employee EMP1 and this is his primary position P underscore POS, but then the same employee is also having an additional position. So the same employee EMP1, he has a secondary or an additional position which is S, let's say underscore POS, right? Okay, now obviously this position is part of some supervisory org, let's say SUP1, and the manager of that supervisory org is MGR1. And similarly, his secondary position or his additional position is in some other supervisory org, SUP2, which is managed by some other supervisory org, some other manager, MGR2. Okay, now the first option says the role only has access to the positions they support. So if you see the first manager, he's managing the supervisory org, and in this supervisory org, this is the position which is staffed, right? So a role only has access to those positions they support. which means MGR1, because he is only supporting position 1 or the primary position of the employee, MGR1 would only have access to his primary position, and MGR2 would have access to his secondary position or his additional position, right? The second setting, if this setting is selected, and what does it say? Role for primary job has access to all the positions. So which is the primary job for this employee? This is the primary job. So when this option is selected, I'm basically saying the role who's managing this primary job, that role would have access to all the positions of the employee, which is position 1 or SP underscore POS, S underscore POS. So in this scenario, only manager 1 would have access to all data on this employee, both his primary position as well as his secondary position. Though the employee would be
So,
staffed in this supervisory org under manager 2, manager 2 would not have any access to this position or any position of the worker. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
so here we are talking about only one employee who has two positions and
Yes,
under two
I'm
different
just taking
supervisory organizations. Okay,
right.
okay,
I'm
okay.
just taking
Yeah,
one employee as an example, but this could be, so if I have
yeah,
10 employees and 5 of them have multiple jobs, the same logic will apply for them as well,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And when I
yeah.
say the third option, if I select this checkbox, role has access to all the positions. So basically what I'm saying is any of these roles, they have access to all the positions of the employee, which means both MGR1 as well as MGR2 would be able to access both positions of the worker. Make
Hmm.
sense? So in first scenario, role only has access to the positions they support. Manager 1 has access to first position, manager 2 has access to second position. In second scenario, the role which supports the primary job or primary position has access to all of his other positions as well, no matter which supervisory org those positions are staffed. So in this scenario, manager 1 has access to all the positions. Again, this employee can have multiple positions as well, right? And in third scenario, both managers have access to all the positions of the employee. All right.
Hmm.
So the ask is
Hmm.
when we select a role-based security group, this is the option we'll have to select. A role has access to the positions they support, which means, and the idea
So,
is, yeah, go ahead.
so how about the other one, right? So there's also organization one.
Mhm.
So are we going to revisit that also, or
Which
so when I
organization?
say see in the assigned role, sorry,
Mhm.
in the role-based constraint security group, there are two
Mhm.
things, right? Organization and its
No, no, that is not
subordinates.
required. So this basically controls what level of access you have. So you're talking about this, right? This part.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Okay. So this basically controls what level of access do you have. So, and this is for normal employees. So what I'm saying is, let's say again, if I talk about this employee, so I have SUP1, right, whose manager is MGR1, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now under SUP1, let's say there are two subordinate organizations, uh, SUP2, which is managed by MGR2, and let's say I have SUP3, which doesn't have a manager, right? Now, what does this say? This setting says that role manager role assignment, and if you look at the setting, it says the assignment is applicable not just to the current organization but also any unassigned subordinates. Now what does it mean? It means this manager role, if you see, it is assigned to this organization, right? And as per the logic, it
Mm-hmm.
says this role is applicable not just to the current organization but any of these subordinate organizations wherein that role is not assigned, which is unassigned subordinate. So this actually talks about
Mm-hmm.
inheritance. So if you see my
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
MGR1, he automatically becomes manager of this. He becomes an inherited
Right.
manager, right? I'm sure you have seen that,
Okay.
right?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
this
yeah, yeah,
talks
yeah.
about inheritance. If I select this option, it basically says the role assignment is only applicable to current organization. So it doesn't matter whether subordinate has assignment or not. This role I have assigned, it is only applicable to the organization on which it is explicitly assigned. When I select this, no inheritance happens, right?
Yeah.
And similarly, there are other options, applies to current organization and all subordinates, and then applies to current organization and subordinates up to a specific level. So when I select this, I'm basically saying manager 1, he has access to supervisory org 1 as well as all of its subordinates. Similarly, manager 2 also has access to supervisory 2 and all of its subordinates, right? So in essence, SUP2 access is there with MGR2 as well as MGR1 as well. So when I select this option, applies to current organization and all subordinates, right? Or I could have said applies to current organization and subordinates up to a specific level, and I can define that level here. So I want this role to be applicable only up to level 1 or maybe level 2. So based on the levels I defined, so this basically identifies the hierarchy until which my access would be applicable. Okay.
Okay. Okay. So what we are saying is, at least whenever we are dealing with Prism Analytics, all we need to worry about are only the access rights to multiple job workers.
Right.
Only that will be considered.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Correct.
I mean,
Usually this.
even the data what I see also, it's applicable only that, correct?
Correct. Correct. Correct.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
The data that you see would be applicable based on what you select. So again,
Yeah.
what you see would also be dependent on this. So for example, if this option is selected,
Oh.
this role, this person, right, in Prism,
Mm.
he would be able to see data for in if this option is selected, MGR1 can see data for employees in SUP1 and SUP3, but not in SUP2 because SUP2 has a specific assignment, right? So based on what option that you select, again, the
Mm.
number of rows of data that you see would also differ. So this is applicable
Uh,
for all employees. This is only applicable for employees with multiple positions.
so let's
Okay.
say I have one question on that security. If is that okay if I
Yeah, yeah, sure.
So the third option, whenever we select, right, it's a security and all the subordinates. So
Hmm.
for example, I have an organization, let's say I have Shri organization. And so Shri organization, below Shri organization, I have Saurabh. And below Saurabh, I have maybe, let's say, Anish. Okay. So in the Anish organization, so I have assigned Anish only. Okay. And but
Hmm.
Saurabh organization, I have not assigned any manager there.
Okay.
So in Shri organization, I am the manager. So when I
Hmm.
select the third option, so what will happen?
Okay, so let's take this example, right? Now, let's say SUP1, because we have is the supervisory org and MGR is
Yeah,
the
yeah,
manager, right? Under
yeah.
him, there are two employees in this sub org. Let's say under SUP2, there are again EMP1, one employee, EMP2 employee, right? And under this, I have EMP3 employee, right? And Saurav is also there. Or let's put Saurav here, EMP4. So Saurav has an additional job. Okay. So under SUP1, I have two employees, right? Under SUP3, I have two employees again. Under SUP2, I have three employees, one of which is Saurav. So Saurav primary position is here in SUP1 and
Mm,
his secondary
mm.
position is in SUP2. Okay. Now, let's look at the options. So the first set of options, let's talk about these set of options. Okay, so what I'm saying is when this option is selected, role has access to the positions they support. right? In that case, manager 1 would be able to see only the details of primary position of Saurabh, will not be able to see the secondary position of Saurabh, right? Because MGR1 is not supporting this position, right? When I select this option, manager 1, he would be able to see primary position of Saurabh as well as secondary position of Saurabh, even though this position is under MGR2, right? Under supervision, right? But then, based on this option, access rights to current organization and unassigned subordinates, because FCUP3 doesn't have a manager assigned, so MGR1 will all details of this employee as well as this employee, plus based on what option I select here, he'll be able to see Saurav data as well. So this is actually a permutation and combination. So if you look at the combination, first
Okay.
let's talk about this. When this option is selected, applies to current organization and unassigned subordinates. So right now, SUP3 doesn't have a manager, right? So
Right. Right.
MGR1 can see Saurav data, Anish data, employee 3 data, employee 4 data. Why is he able
Right.
to see data of employee 3 and employee 4?
Because
Because
that manager got inherited.
yes, and that is because of this option, right?
This option.
But
Yeah.
then whether he can see Saurav's data or not depends on these options selected. So he cannot definitely see employee 1 and employee 2 data because his access is only
Hmm.
applicable if the subordinate is
Yeah.
unassigned. But can
Right.
he see data of Saurav's to secondary position? It depends on what
Yeah,
access is
because
selected.
correct. Okay, okay. Okay,
Make
makes
sense?
sense. Yeah, got it. Got it. Got it. Got it. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
Now,
clear.
all right. So in terms of domains, if you see there are two kinds of domains. If I go back to functional areas and search for Prism Analytics. So if you see here, there are actually two types of domains. One is table manage and then tables owner manage, right?
Oh,
And
okay.
then we
Mhm.
have uh, manage, data sets manage and owner data sets owner manage, right?
Okay.
Okay. So basically the manage domain, if I say Prism datasets manage, right? Or if I say Prism tables manage, this domain gives you access to edit a table or edit a dataset,
Okay.
right? However, if I give you access to owner manage domain, so again there are two domains. One is tables manage, one is tables owner manage, one is datasets manage, and then we have datasets owner manage. So if I give you
Okay.
access to datasets manage domain or tables manage domain, this will allow you to edit those datasets or edit tables, right? But when I give you
Mhm.
owners manage access, this will allow you, for example, to share a dataset, right? So this will allow you to delete data within that dataset. Okay, so Workday has
Mhm.
differentiate. With the first one, you can change a data set. What do I mean by changing a data set? You can, for example, add a row. You can change the field type and so on and so forth, right? But with
Okay.
owners manage, you have the access to delete data or share data in the data sets or share data sets itself,
Mhm.
right? So we have
Okay.
two kinds of manage versus owner manage.
Is it like, maybe, can I, so I'll just repeat my understanding. Correct me if I'm wrong. So what I felt is manage is kind of an admin, right? Whoever is having
Mm-hmm.
domain access to the
Mm-hmm.
domain, so he or she can manage any type of data sets or tables.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Is that correct statement
Let me
or
let me
wrong?
write that down and then we can discuss.
Okay.
Okay, first. So
Okay.
we
Okay.
have Prism data sets manage, and then we also
Mm.
have Prism tables manage, right? So this domain or these domains, they control access to edit a data set or to edit a table. All right. When I say edit a data set again or edit a table, for example, I can change the field type of a table. Instead of text, I can change it to an instance field. Instead of numeric
Mm.
field, I can change it to an integer field. I can add new fields. So basically changing the schema of the data set, right?
Mhm.
So that is my manage. Then we have similar to that, the owners manage. So we have data set or table owner manage, right? And these
Okay.
domains, they control access to perform specific operations within the data set or table, of course, such as sharing the data sets or tables
Uh,
with other users.
oh,
Okay. So the first one is basically you can edit a table or a data set, and the second one is you can share those data sets and tables with other users. Okay.
mhm, mhm.
Now, see, it might be you want to give the same security group access to both of these domains. So it's not necessary that one manage will be given to, let's say, ABC security group or data admin security group, and owners manage will be given to a different security group. At least in my project, we give the access to both these domains to the same security groups, to data administrators and so on and so forth.
Okay.
Okay. It's not necessary. It all depends on the project requirement, how you want to handle this.
So does it mean the manage one will not have access to sharing the data
Yeah,
sets? It's
direct,
only
unless,
the
yes,
okay, only when you give owner manage, then only
yes,
they'll be able to. Okay.
correct.
Hmm. Okay.
All right. Now we have already spoken about, I believe, the data workflow, but I'll quickly write that down. I think we have already discussed this. These three steps, I think we spoke about this in a bit of detail
Hmm.
earlier as well when we started,
Yeah.
but no problem. I'll quickly write that down. So the first step is to create tables or and base data sets to bring in data. So the first step is to actually bring in data into your Prism environment. This data could be your workday data, this could be your non-workday data, right? So any
Hmm.
data, you'll obviously bring the data. The second thing is to transform this data. Now this data is transformed with the help of derived data sets. So base data sets is where you bring in your data. So this is your first set of or your tables, and then you create derived
Derived.
data sets to transform this data. Now, this transformation can happen in multiple ways, right? You have the function to blend, you have the manage fields, you can create Prism calculated fields, you can perform joins and so on and so forth, right?
Mm.
Then the next step is apply security as to who can access that data or that domain. The fourth step is to make the data available for analysis, and you do that by basically publishing the data. And finally, we analyze and visualize the data, and this is something you do with the help of your reports, dashboards, or despite. All right. So I believe we have already spoken about this, and that's why.
Yeah.
But any questions? Do you have any questions? So we'll talk about these base data sets and derived data sets and published data sets. So there are three types of
Okay.
data sets. Uh, this one is base data sets, then we have derived data sets, and finally we have the published data sets. And we'll talk about
Okay.
these.
Okay. So, do we need to use all these three data sets every time whenever we
Uh,
create any?
See, obviously, if you want to get any data into Workday, you'll have
Okay.
to create either base data sets or tables, right? Now,
Okay. Okay.
obviously, you
Mm.
will get data into Prism, right? Uh, through
Right.
Workday. So you're now from there you can directly publish the data set, but obviously it never works that way that you'll get data and directly publish it. You'll have to do some
Mm.
transformations on it, right? At least
Transformation. Okay.
join data, perform logic,
Mm.
so then your
Mm-hmm.
derived data
Mm-hmm.
sets come into picture. And
Okay.
finally, if you want to create Prism data source, then you'll have to publish the data set. So in essence, the answer is yes, because only then we are talking about ETL workflow, extract, transform, load,
Transform load. Okay.
right?
Okay.
Uh, Okay, so now the starting point, or when I keep talking about this Prism environment and I say you create a base data set to get data into Prism environment, that is all your data
Mm-hmm.
catalog. So this is your Prism
Okay.
environment, right? So data catalog is your one source place wherein you can view all of your data sets, right? And this is your starting point for using the Prism
Mm-hmm.
analytics. Uh,
Okay. Data catalog. Okay.
Sorry, it's create.
CATA.
Sorry. Okay, so this is your report or your application or your Prism environment. Okay, now there are two things
Mm.
based on whether you have access to view tables based on the domains. You'll be able to see the relevant tabs. So if you don't have access to view or create tables, you'll not see this tab. Similarly, if you don't have access to the datasets
Mm.
domain, you'll not see the datasets tab. And then finally, all this is where you see everything. You'll see tables as well as datasets.
Mm.
Okay, so
Okay.
this is where you see all data which is available to you. All
Yeah.
right.
Okay.
Okay, the next thing, there are a few options. Now, this is what I meant. If I come to dataset, if you
Right.
see, I have the
Mm.
option. Now, there are different means for creating a dataset, and we'll talk about these means. So, if we look at the dataset tab, you have this column called
Mm.
source type. And with respect to
Okay.
the source type, if you see one of those source types is a workday report, right? So
Right.
obviously these are the data sets which are created
Mhm.
using your Workday reports, which is basically extracting data from within Workday, right?
Okay.
But then if you see some other options, there are some files as well. So we have some files, and there is a third option called SFTP as well. But then here the problem is this is a test system and you don't get access to an SFTP server, right? From where you can get data. But then the same concept. So files means
Mhm.
reading data
Mhm.
from your own local
Okay.
machine, or you can use an SFTP server as well. Okay. Now this is, if you look at the
Okay.
status, this is where I see the status of that data set, and the status can either be published or non-published,
Mhm.
right? So this is when a data set gets published, it becomes a data source, a Prism data source. So we'll talk about this, right? So for now, this is where if I can filter data to look at published data sets, non-published data sets. I can filter my data based on the source type. And right now the source type is Workday report, files, or Prism data sets. So when we say Prism data sets, these are the data sets that have been converted into your final published data sets. It
Mhm.
also shows me this inspector panel. So when I click on any of these rows, system shows me an inspector panel wherein I can see the details
Okay.
of it. It will basically show me the same information. I can see the last modified. I can see what security has been applied to the data source. I can see from where the data source has been created, whether it is from files or SFTP or how. I can also check the status of the data source, right?
Okay.
And I can also see all who has imported along with the fields of that data set. So this data set has some
Mhm.
5 or 6 fields,
Okay.
right? Okay. Tables is a completely different concept, is a new concept, it's a novel concept. It Workday is trying to emulate a normal table, a database table,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Again, this is very similar to dataset and we'll talk about this. So for now, will a table or a base dataset. So your data can be read into either a table or a base dataset, and we'll talk about that too.
Okay. Mhm.
Okay, the activities button, and again we'll talk about the activities button. This again shows me a lot of information uh, about the different data sets, the usage, the publishing status, and so on and so forth. So again, this is something we'll talk about,
Okay.
right? Okay, so your data catalog, right?
One question I had. So I was just
Mhm.
trying in the community. If you remember, we have something called shared demonstration tenants, right? So
WD setup.
have you heard
Uh,
about that? No, no, not the
no,
WD setup, but we have something called shared demonstration tenants
oh, is it?
with the
I have
GMS
never.
login and all.
Oh, can you show me? Uh,
Oh,
I have.
okay.
Let me make you presenter. I have never.
No, I
Okay.
think if you log into community, I can show you.
Okay.
Because right now I'm connecting through mobile. If that is okay with you.
Sure, sure. Let me log in. I have
But
actually never.
if you're working for a implementer, right? So you
Mhm.
have that option. So
Oh, is it? Okay,
yeah.
sure.
Mm.
So you don't have that
So
option, is it?
they have.
Because you're not working for an
Yeah, I don't
implementer?
see a data. No, I don't see a data catalog there. I was getting some error message. So it's
Okay.
kind of
Where
a
do I
shared.
navigate from here?
Yeah. If you go under releases, please.
Mm-hmm.
Releases, the shared demonstration tenants.
Oh, I've never seen this.
Recently only I
Okay.
also. GMS login, please.
And so, what credentials will it ask? It won't ask for any credentials, is it?
It won't ask for anything. Yeah, login as Logan McNeil, please. Can you scroll down? Login McNeil. Yeah, it does take you to Logan McNeil straight away. Sign in
Okay.
me as I agree and the team.
I knew of the WD setup tenant, but and I knew that it will
Yeah,
be.
even I was only aware of that. Yeah,
This is good. Thank you.
I think probably for the POCs, maybe for testing. I don't know what is the purpose there.
So
So,
can
anyways, if you
we
type the sorry, Ravi.
I mean can we create something here?
Yeah,
Let's
yeah,
say create.
absolutely. Why not? Can you just type data catalog? So he is like a
Okay. I the widget was
uh,
not found.
yeah.
Princess has
So
correct
this
model.
was the error that we were getting. So I thought to check with you, but you only know now, right? So it's
Right,
fine.
right. Okay, but this is good. This is okay. And this has all the configuration already there. Let's quickly check.
Yeah, absolutely. You can do all the configurations. You can do dashboards, discovery boards, all sort of things. If you have implementer login, I don't
Mhm.
know about the client login.
So, what is your
Um,
login? Is it implementer login?
no, mine is a client login because my friend
Okay.
showed me this, so I was just.
Okay. So, have you tried? No.
Hmm. I tried creating supervisory orgs and all that. So just like
That
can
means
we,
it gives you access. Okay.
yeah, payroll and everything we can accept. You cannot do security changes though. But
Mm.
yeah,
Okay. Makes sense. Sure.
yeah. I thought you might aware. So anyways, so that error
Why not?
popping up. So I thought you know what will be
No,
that
no.
error. Okay, it's
Because I
fine.
have my own GMS. I usually never tried here, but yeah, this is a good place. Sure. Thank you.
Okay.